The mining colony on planet Kepler 442 billion was very quiet that morning. Dr. Emma Walsh was checking the daily reports when the alarm started screaming. She ran to the main window and saw something that made her blood freeze. Black ships were coming down from the sky like metal vultures. Commander Jake Morrison rushed into the control room where his team was working frantically. The alien ships had appeared without any warning, and they were already firing at the colony defenses. The energy beams from their weapons were cutting through the protective shields like hot knives through butter. "How many ships are there?" Morrison asked his communications officer Riley Brooks, who was sweating as she worked at her station. 15 large vessels, sir, and maybe 30 smaller ones," Riley said while her fingers moved quickly across the controls. "Their weapons are much stronger than ours. Our defensive grid is failing fast." Morrison watched the screens showing the battle outside. The alien attackers called themselves the Vex Imperium, and they had made their intentions very clear through a brief transmission before the attack began. They wanted to destroy every human on the planet and take the valuable minerals for themselves. The colony had been humanity's farthest outpost for 3 years. It was supposed to be safe this far from Earth. The colonists were miners, scientists, and engineers who had come here to build a new life among the stars. They were not soldiers, and they were not prepared for war. "Sir, we need to evacuate the civilian areas," said Chief Security Officer Tom Bradley as explosions shook the building. "The outer domes are taking heavy damage, and we cannot hold them much longer." Morrison nodded, but he knew they had nowhere to run. The evacuation ships were too slow, and the alien vessels would destroy them easily. The colony was trapped and outgunned with no hope of rescue from Earth, which was hundreds of light years away. "Send a distress signal," Morrison ordered. "Emergency frequency maximum power." Riley looked up from her console with confusion in her eyes. "Sir, the nearest military base is 40 light years away. Even if they receive our signal and send help immediately, it would take weeks for them to arrive. We do not have weeks." Morrison walked to the communications panel and entered a special code that he had hoped never to use. The code was classified above top secret, and only a few people in the entire galaxy knew what it meant. He had been briefed about it when he took command of the colony, but he never thought he would actually need it. "Send code Omega," Morrison said quietly, the color drained from Riley's face. "Sir, are you certain?" "Code Omega is reserved for extinction-level threats. It will alert every human ship in the galaxy and activate protocols that have been dormant for decades." "Do it now," Morrison said firmly as another explosion rocked the building and the lights flickered. Riley's hands shook as she typed the code into the system. The signal was brief, but it carried more weight than any message ever sent by humanity. Code Omega meant that humans were being exterminated, and that the survival of the entire species was at risk. The signal transmitted across space at faster than light speed. It reached automated listening posts, hidden throughout the galaxy, that had been waiting silently for this moment. Ancient computers awakened and began sending secondary signals to locations that were marked as highly classified on Earth in the military command center. Deep beneath the surface, Admiral Elena Vasquez was reviewing routine patrol reports when every alarm in the facility started blaring. She had been in the military for 30 years, but she had never heard these particular alarms before. "Admiral, we have a code Omega signal from Kepler 442b," her aide Captain David Park said as he ran into her office with a datapad in his hands. Vasquez felt her heart skip a beat. Code Omega had been established after first contact with alien species, when humanity realized they might not be alone in a friendly universe. It was the signal that meant humans were facing complete annihilation somewhere in the galaxy. "Confirm the signal," she ordered. "Confirmed, Admiral. The authentication codes are correct, and the transmission originated from Commander Morrison's personal command station." Vasquez stood up and walked to the wall where a red panel had opened to reveal a keypad she had never seen activated. She entered her personal authorization code and pressed her palm against the scanner. The system beeped, and suddenly every screen in the room lit up with classified information. All units, this is Admiral Vasquez, she announced over the ship-wide communication system of her flagship, the UES Retribution. We have received a Code Omega distress signal. As of this moment, we are at condition red and all personnel will report to battle stations immediately. The Retribution was humanity's most advanced dreadnought, but it would not be going to Kepler 442b alone. The Code Omega signal had activated the Terran Defense Initiative, which was humanity's greatest secret. While humans had appeared to be peaceful, explorers and traders for the past 50 years, they had actually been preparing for exactly this situation. Hidden bases throughout the solar system began to power up. Ships that had been concealed in asteroid belts and behind moons started their engines for the first time in years. The Ghost Fleet was awakening, and it was much larger than any alien species had ever imagined. Captain, Alex Rivera felt the familiar vibration as his ship, the UES Phantom, powered up its stealth systems. His vessel looked like a simple cargo hauler to any external observer, but hidden beneath fake hull plates were weapons that could destroy cruisers. He had been waiting for this moment for 15 years. All hands, this is the captain, Rivera announced to his crew. The moment we have trained for has finally arrived. Humanity is under attack, and we are going to remind the galaxy why they should fear us. Similar scenes were happening on hundreds of ships throughout human space. The merchant vessels that had been trading peacefully with alien species were revealing hidden weapons. The research ships that had been exploring distant systems were dropping their scientific equipment and activating military hardware. On Kepler 442b, the battle was getting worse. The Vex ships had broken through the outer defenses and were beginning to attack the main habitat domes where the civilians were hiding. Morrison watched the tactical display and realized they had maybe 30 minutes before the colony was completely overrun. "Sir, I am detecting something strange," Riley said as she studied her sensor readings. "There are energy signatures appearing at the edge of the system, but I cannot identify their source." Morrison looked at her screen, and for the first time since the attack began, he allowed himself to smile. The signatures were faint, but they matched the profiles he had been shown in his classified briefings. Help was coming, and it was coming fast. The Vex had made a terrible mistake. They had assumed humanity was a weak species confined to a few scattered colonies. They had no idea that Earth's children had been preparing for war while pretending to embrace peace. The simple SOS had awakened something that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Fleet Admiral Marcus Kane opened his eyes after 47 years of cryogenic sleep. The revival process was always disorienting, but his mind quickly cleared as he remembered why he had been awakened. Only a Code Omega signal could break his suspension, and that meant humanity was facing extinction somewhere in the galaxy. Dr. Lisa Park stood beside his revival pod with a worried expression on her face. She had been the one to activate the emergency protocols when the signal arrived, and she knew what it meant. The Terran Defense Initiative was about to reveal itself to the galaxy. "Status report," Dr. Kane said as he sat up slowly and let his body adjust to being awake again. "Code Omega confirmed, sir. An alien force calling itself the Vex Imperium has attacked our colony on Kepler 442b. Initial reports suggest they are trying to eliminate all human presence in that system." Kane stood up, and his uniform began to materialize around him as the ship's fabrication systems responded to his biometric signature. He had been chosen to lead humanity's secret fleet because he understood what needed to be done when diplomacy failed. "How long since the signal was transmitted?" he asked. 18 hours, sir. We have lost contact with 3 outer colonies, and the attackers appear to be moving toward the inner systems. Kane walked to the command station that had been waiting for him for nearly 5 decades. The ship around him was called the UES Nemesis, and it was 3 kilometers of pure destructive power. No alien species knew it existed, and that was exactly how humanity wanted it. "Wake the Ghost Fleet," Kane ordered. "All of them." Dr. Park's eyes widened. "Sir, that means activating over 4,000 vessels. The energy signatures alone will be visible across half the galaxy." "Good, let them see what happens when they threaten our people." Throughout the solar system, hidden bases that had been dormant for decades, suddenly came to life. The Ghost Fleet had been humanity's greatest secret project. While alien species thought humans were peaceful traders and explorers, they had actually been building the largest military force in Galactic. History. Captain Tom Bradley felt the deck of his ship vibrate as the UES Shadow powered up its engines. His vessel was a stealth destroyer that had been hidden inside a hollowed-out asteroid for 20 years. Around him, his crew worked with practiced efficiency as they prepared for their first real combat mission. Stealth systems online, Captain, reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Maria Santos. All weapons charged and ready for deployment. Excellent. Signal the rest of Squadron 7. We move in formation Alpha 9 toward the target system. What the Vex Imperium had interpreted as a simple distress call had actually been an activation sequence that reached every human military vessel in the galaxy. Ships that had been pretending to be civilian craft suddenly revealed their true nature. Commander Alex Rivera stood in what appeared to be the cargo bay of a merchant vessel. At his command, hidden floor panels retracted to reveal dozens of fighter craft that had been concealed for years. His crew had been living undercover as traders while waiting for this moment. "Remember what we have trained for," he told his pilots as they prepared to launch. "The galaxy thinks we are weak and peaceful. Today we show them what humanity really is when we are pushed too far." The fighters launched from hidden bays throughout the ship and immediately activated their stealth systems. They were just one squadron among hundreds that were converging on Kepler 442b. From all directions. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Retribution as her battle group prepared to enter hyperspace. Her ship was leading 200 vessels, but they were only the visible portion of the response fleet. Hidden among them were stealth ships that would not appear on any sensor until they chose to reveal themselves. "All units, this is Admiral Vasquez," she announced on the fleet communication channel. "Remember that we are not just fighting for one colony. We are fighting for the future of humanity among the stars. Show these aliens what happens when they underestimate us." The response was not just military vessels. Every human ship in the galaxy was converging on the battle zone, including the merchant marine that had been secretly armed for decades. Cargo haulers revealed hidden weapons bays. Research ships activated military sensors that had been disguised as scientific equipment. Captain Diana Cross commanded what appeared to be a simple exploration vessel, but was actually a heavy cruiser with weapons that could destroy small moons. She had been mapping alien territories for 15 years while gathering intelligence about their military capabilities. "All hands, this is the captain," she announced to her crew. "We have spent years pretending to be harmless scientists. Today we drop the act and remind the galaxy why they should respect humanity." The Vex had made their attack based on outdated intelligence. They believed humans were a minor species with limited military capabilities. They had observed human ships for decades and cataloged their technology as primitive and their tactics as predictable. What they had actually observed was an elaborate deception. Every human vessel they had encountered was operating far below its actual capabilities. The peaceful traders were gathering intelligence. The scientific expeditions were conducting reconnaissance. The civilian cargo runs were positioning weapons and supplies for exactly this scenario. Warlord Crix of the Vex Imperium stood on the command deck of his flagship watching the human colony burn. The conquest had been easier than expected, and he was already planning which system to attack next. These humans put up a decent fight, but their technology was clearly inferior to Vex weapons. Warlord, his tactical officer, Subcommander Nex, approached with a puzzled expression. "We are detecting unusual energy signatures at the edge of the system." Crix barely looked up from his tactical display. "Reinforcements from their homeworld." "No doubt. How many ships are approaching?" "That is unclear, sir. Our sensors are showing conflicting readings." "Explain." Nex's mandibles clicked nervously. "The energy signatures suggest a massive fleet, but our visual sensors show mostly empty space. It must be some kind of sensor malfunction." Crix finally turned to face his subordinate. "Run full diagnostics on all sensor arrays?" I want to know exactly what we are dealing with. What they were dealing with was technology that had been developed specifically to counter alien sensor systems. Human intelligence had been studying Vex equipment for years and had designed stealth systems that could fool their detection methods. Completely. The approaching human fleet was using a combination of advanced stealth technology and psychological warfare that had been perfected through decades of preparation. The visible ships were just the tip of the iceberg, and the real surprise was still hidden. On KEPLER 442B, Commander Morrison watched his tactical display as more and more energy signatures appeared throughout the system. What had started as a handful of contacts had grown into something that seemed impossible. Sir, Riley said with amazement in her voice. I am counting over 3,000 ships and more are still arriving. How is this possible? Morrison smiled for the first time since the attack began. Because humanity has been preparing for this day for a very long time. The galaxy is about to learn that we are not what we seem. The trap was closing around the Vex fleet, and they had no idea what was about to happen to them. Warlord Crix stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Shadowbringer, watching the final human outposts burn on the planet below. The conquest had been even easier than his military advisors had predicted. These humans had shown some courage, but their weapons were clearly no match for Vex technology. The Vex Imperium had been expanding across the galaxy for 3 centuries, and they had conquered dozens of species. Humans appeared to be just another primitive race that would soon join the long list of civilizations that had fallen before Vex might. Warlord Subcommander Nex approached cautiously from his sensor station. We are detecting some unusual readings on the outer edge of the system. Crix did not look up from his victory reports. Reinforcements from their home system, one assume. How many ships are we dealing with? That is difficult to determine, sir. The sensor readings are very confusing. Confusing in what way? Crix finally turned to face his tactical officer with mild irritation. Nex's 4 arms gestured helplessly at his display screen. The energy signatures suggest a very large fleet, but our visual scans show mostly empty space. Our equipment may be malfunctioning. Crix walked over to examine the readings himself. As a veteran of 50 battles, he knew how to interpret sensor data, but what he was seeing made no sense. The energy patterns indicated hundreds of ships, but there was nothing visible in those locations. Run complete diagnostics on all sensor systems, he ordered. I want to know exactly what we are facing before we engage. What the Vex were facing was humanity's greatest military achievement. For decades, human engineers had been studying alien sensor technology and developing stealth systems that could fool any detection method in the galaxy. The approaching fleet was hidden in plain sight. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, leading a battle group of 200 ships toward the Kepler system. But her visible fleet was only a small part of the force that was converging on the Vex position. Hidden among her vessels were stealth ships that would not appear on enemy sensors until they chose to reveal themselves. All units, this is Admiral Vasquez, she announced on the fleet communication channel. Remember that we are not just fighting for one colony today. We are fighting to send a message to every hostile species in the galaxy. Show them what happens when they threaten Earth's children. The first phase of the battle plan was deception. The visible human ships approached in a standard formation that made them appear to be a desperate rescue force. The Vex, seeing what looked like easy prey, moved their fleet to intercept and destroy the reinforcements. Captain Tom Bradley watched from the bridge of his stealth destroyer UES Shadow as the enemy ships repositioned themselves. His vessel was completely invisible to Vex sensors, and he was positioned directly behind their main battle line. Signal all stealth units, Bradley ordered. Execute flanking maneuver Omega-7 on my mark. Throughout the system, dozens of invisible ships began to move into attack positions. The Vex had no idea they were being surrounded by an enemy they could not see. Their sensors showed only the small relief force approaching from one direction. On the surface of Kepler 442b, the surviving colonists watched in amazement as more and more ships began appearing on their screens. What had looked like a small rescue fleet was growing into something that seemed impossible. Dr. Emma Walsh stared at the tactical display in disbelief. "Commander Morrison, how many ships do we have out there?" Morrison checked his readings again to make sure he was not making a mistake. "I count over 3,000 vessels and more are still arriving. The entire human fleet must be converging on our position." The truth was even more impressive than Morrison realized. Every human ship in the galaxy was responding to the code Omega signal. Merchant vessels were dropping their civilian disguises and revealing hidden weapons. Research ships were activating military systems that had been concealed for years. Captain Alex Rivera stood in what had appeared to be the cargo bay of a simple freight hauler. At his command, hidden panels opened to reveal fighter craft that had been waiting for this moment. His ship had been trading peacefully with alien species for 15 years while secretly gathering intelligence. "All pilots listen carefully," Rivera addressed his squadron. "We have been underestimated by every species we have encountered. They think we are soft and primitive. Today we show them what humanity really is." The fighters launched from concealed bays throughout the merchant fleet and immediately activated their stealth systems. They were part of a massive air wing that was about to demonstrate human air superiority to the Vex. Warlord Crix finally realized that something was very wrong when his sensors detected the launch of over 1,000 fighter craft from ships that were supposed to be unarmed cargo vessels. The humans had been deceiving everyone about their true military capabilities. "All ships assume combat formation," Crix commanded. "Prepare for immediate engagement." But as his fleet moved to attack the visible human ships, the trap closed around them. The stealth vessels decloaked simultaneously, revealing that the Vex were not just outnumbered but completely surrounded. What had seemed like a small relief force was actually the largest military fleet ever assembled in Galactic history. Captain Diana Cross commanded the stealth cruiser UES Phantom, which had been hidden behind the system's largest moon. Her ship was equipped with weapons that had been developed in absolute secrecy and tested only in computer simulations. "All weapons charged and ready, Captain," her tactical officer reported. "Fire," Cross ordered. The opening salvo from the human fleet lit up space like a new star. Vex ships that had seemed invincible minutes earlier began exploding under the concentrated firepower of weapons they had never encountered before. Sub-Commander Nex stared at his tactical display in horror as Vex vessels disappeared from his screens. "Sir, we are taking massive casualties. Their weapons are far more advanced than our intelligence suggested." Crix watched 3 of his heavy cruisers explode in brilliant flashes. "Impossible. Our technology is superior to anything these primitives possess." "Sir, I think we have been deceived. The humans have been hiding their true capabilities for decades." The battle was turning into a massacre, but not the one the Vex had planned. Their ships designed for fighting other primitive species found themselves facing weapons and tactics that they had never imagined possible. Captain Rivera's fighter squadron struck the Vex flagship with precision that came from years of training. His pilots had practiced this exact scenario hundreds of times in simulation, and they executed their attack with deadly efficiency. "This is Blade Leader," Rivera reported. "Beginning attack run on enemy command ship." The Shadowbringer's shields flared as human fighters swarmed around it like angry insects. Crix realized with growing horror that his supposedly superior technology was being countered by human ingenuity and superior tactics. The Vex had made the same mistake that every aggressive species eventually made. They had underestimated their enemy, and now they were paying the price. The humans they had dismissed as primitive traders and explorers were revealing themselves to be the most dangerous military force in the galaxy. Admiral Vasquez coordinated the final phase of the attack from her command ship. "All units close formation and finish them. No survivors." The message being sent today would echo across the galaxy for generations. Humanity was no longer hiding among the stars. They were announcing their presence with overwhelming force. Fleet Admiral Marcus Kane stood in the command center of the UES Nemesis, watching the battle unfold on the main tactical display. His ship was 3 kilometers of pure destruction, and it represented the crown jewel of humanity's secret fleet. For 47 years he had waited in cryogenic sleep for this moment. "Admiral, we are in position," Captain Diana Cross reported from her station. "The Vex flagship is within range of our main batteries." Kane studied the tactical situation carefully. The battle had been raging for 6 hours, and while the human fleet was clearly winning, the cost was higher than he had hoped. The Vex were fighting with desperate fury as they realized their mistake. "Signal all units to clear the firing lanes," Kane ordered. "It is time to end this." The Nemesis had been hidden behind the system's largest moon during the initial engagement. Its massive bulk had been concealed by both advanced stealth technology and careful positioning. Now, as it moved into open space, the Vex sensors finally detected something that made their commanders freeze with terror. Warlord Crix stared at his tactical display in complete disbelief. The human ship that was approaching was larger than his entire command squadron. Its energy signature was so powerful that his computers could barely process the readings. "How is this possible?" Crix demanded. "Our intelligence report said they were a primitive species with limited technology." "Sub-Commander." Nex's voice trembled as he read the sensor data. "Sir, that vessel appears to be armed with weapons that could destroy small planets. We may have seriously underestimated human capabilities." The Nemesis opened fire and space itself seemed to burn. The main batteries unleashed destruction on a scale that the Vex had never witnessed before. 3 of their heavy cruisers simply ceased to exist, vaporized in the opening salvo. Captain Tom Bradley watched from his stealth destroyer as the dreadnought's weapons carved through the enemy fleet. "Now that is what I call proper firepower," he said with satisfaction. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. The Vex fleet, which had been fighting with disciplined coordination, began to waver. Ships started pulling back, looking for escape routes that did not exist. Admiral Elena Vasquez coordinated the final assault from her flagship. "All units close formation and finish them. Make sure the galaxy remembers this day." But the Vex were not finished yet. Faced with complete annihilation, they began fighting with the desperation of cornered animals. Their ships turned into guided missiles, ramming human vessels in explosive collisions that lit up the darkness. Captain Alex Rivera found his fighter squadron locked in deadly combat with Vex interceptors whose pilots had nothing left to lose. The enemy fighters were skilled, and they were making the humans pay for every victory. "This is Blade Leader," Rivera reported over the communication channel, "taking heavy fire. These pilots do not want to die quietly." The space around Kepler 442b became a graveyard of twisted metal and burning plasma. Human ships, despite their superior numbers and technology, were taking significant casualties. The Vex were making them earn every meter of space on the planet's surface. The colonists watched the battle with mixture of awe and terror. Explosions bloomed like deadly flowers against the starfield, and each one represented dozens of lives lost on both sides. "Sir," Riley called to Commander Morrison, "we are receiving a direct transmission from Admiral Kane on the Nemesis." Morrison activated the communication system and found himself looking at a face that had been shaped by decades of military service. The Admiral's eyes were hard, but there was something almost paternal in his expression. "Commander Morrison, this is Fleet Admiral Kane. I want you to know that your people's courage will not be forgotten. The Vex will pay for every life they have taken today." "Thank you, sir. We are honored to have held the line." Kane's expression became even more determined. "The line does not just hold, Commander. It advances. Prepare your people for liberation." The final phase of the battle began with a coordinated assault on the Vex flagship. The Shadowbringer, despite its advanced shields and armor, found itself overwhelmed by firepower from dozens of human ships. Warlord Crix stood on his burning command deck as explosions rocked his ship. Around him, his crew worked frantically to keep their vessel operational, but the damage was too extensive. The humans had turned his mighty flagship into a floating wreck. Sir Nex reported with panic in his voice. "Main power is failing. Weapons are offline. We have hull breaches on 12 decks." Crix looked at the tactical display one last time and saw the complete destruction of his fleet. Only a handful of Vex ships were still operational, and they were surrounded by hundreds of human vessels. "Signal the homeworld," he ordered. "Tell them the humans are not what they appear to be. Tell them we have awakened something that should have been left sleeping, but the message was never sent." The Shadowbringer exploded in a brilliant flash that could be seen from the planet's surface. The Vex commander and his knowledge died with. His ship docked as the last enemy vessel was destroyed, and eerie silence fell over the battlefield. The human fleet had achieved total victory, but the cost had been significant. More importantly, they had sent a message that would echo across the galaxy. Fleet Admiral Kane's voice echoed on all frequencies. "This is Fleet Admiral Kane of the Terran Defense Initiative. Let it be known throughout the galaxy that humanity protects its own. Attack our people and face the consequences." Captain Diana Cross stood on the bridge of her cruiser surveying the wreckage. "Sir, what are your orders regarding the Vex survivors?" Kane considered the question carefully. "Rescue any survivors we can find. The galaxy needs to see that we are not monsters. But make sure they understand what happens to those who threaten human colonies." The rescue operations began immediately. Human ships moved through the debris field looking for Vex escape pods and damaged vessels. It was important that some of the enemy survived to carry word of what had happened here. Dr. Lisa Park worked frantically in the medical bay treating both human and Vex casualties. The alien prisoners looked at their human captors with mixture of fear and confusion. They had expected to be executed, but instead they were receiving medical care. "Why are you helping us?" one wounded Vex officer asked through a translator. "Because that is who we are," Dr. Park replied. "We do not kill the helpless, but we will destroy anyone who threatens our people." The message was clear. Humanity could be merciful neighbors or terrible enemies depending on how they were treated. The choice belonged to those who encountered them. On Kepler 442b, the colonists began emerging from their shelters to see human ships filling the sky above them. The nightmare was over, and they had survived to tell the galaxy about human determination and human strength. Commander Morrison stood in the ruins of his command center looking up at the stars. The simple SOS signal that had started this battle had become something much larger. It had announced humanity's true presence in the galaxy, and nothing would ever be the same. 3 months after the Battle of Kepler 442b, the galaxy was a different place. The Galactic Council had called an emergency session on the neutral world of Arcturus Prime, and for the first time in their history, they had invited humanity to join. Their deliberations, Ambassador Robert Chun sat at a table that had been hastily expanded to accommodate the human delegation. The Council had previously viewed humans as a minor species useful for trade but irrelevant to galactic politics. The revelation of Earth's true military strength had shattered that perception overnight. Chancellor Vex of the Andorian Republic stood to address the assembly. His species had been one of the founding members of the Council, and they were used to being the dominant military power in their region of space. "We are here to discuss the implications of recent events," Chancellor Vex announced. The Vex Imperium's unprovoked attack on human colonies has been condemned by this council, but we must also address the human response. Ambassador Chun rose from his seat with calm dignity. The human response was proportional to the threat we faced. We defended our people, nothing more. Proportional. Chancellor Vex's voice carried a note of disbelief. "You deployed a fleet of over 4,000 ships? You obliterated an entire Vex battle group. This suggests military capabilities far beyond what you had previously disclosed." Chun's smile was diplomatic but cold. "We had no obligation to disclose our defensive capabilities. The Vex discovered them through their own actions. In the months following the battle, the truth about humanity's long deception had gradually emerged. The peaceful traders had been gathering intelligence for decades. The research expeditions had been mapping every system and cataloging every species' military capabilities. The civilian cargo runs had been positioning weapons and supplies throughout the galaxy. Humanity had been preparing for war while appearing to embrace peace, and the galaxy was still trying to understand the implications. Fleet Admiral Marcus Kane now served as Earth's chief of military. operations, and he had been very busy implementing the next phase of humanity's expansion. New colonies were being established, but these were not the vulnerable outposts of the past. "Sir," Captain Diana Cross reported from the bridge of the Nemesis, "we are receiving requests from 12 different species asking to establish defensive pacts with Earth." Kane nodded without surprise. The galaxy had seen what happened to those who threatened humanity. Now everyone wanted to be on the winning side. The Vex Imperium itself had collapsed completely following their defeat. The destruction of their fleet had been so total and so devastating that their client species had abandoned them immediately. The once mighty empire had fragmented into dozens of smaller territories. Captain Tom Bradley now commanded a new stealth destroyer and patrolled the former Vex territories. His mission was simple but important. He was to ensure that no new threats emerged from the chaos left behind by the Empire's collapse. Sir Lieutenant Maria Santos reported, "We are detecting a distress signal from Vex refugee convoy. They are requesting safe passage to neutral space." Bradley considered the request carefully. The Vex who had survived the battle were a broken people. Their military was destroyed and their empire was in ruins. Grant them passage, but maintain surveillance. The galaxy needs to see that we can be merciful. The psychological impact of humanity's victory had been as important as the military success. The galaxy had learned that humans could be peaceful neighbors or terrible enemies depending on how they were treated by others. On Kepler 442b, the rebuilt colony had become a monument to human resilience and determination. Commander Morrison had been promoted to planetary governor, and he stood in the memorial garden dedicated to those who had died in the initial attack. "The Vex wanted to erase us from this world," he said to the gathered crowd of colonists and visiting dignitaries. "Instead, they awakened something that will reshape the galaxy. We mourn our dead, but we also celebrate our survival." The simple SOS that had started the chain of events had become a rallying cry for humanity's expansion among the stars. Within a year, human colonies had doubled in number, and the species that had once been ignored was now courted by every major power. Ambassador Chun concluded his address to the Galactic Council with words that would be remembered for generations. Humanity sought only to live in peace among the stars. We were forced to reveal our true nature by those who would destroy us. He paused and looked around the chamber at the alien delegates who were listening with rapt attention. "Let this serve as a lesson to all who would threaten Earth's children. We are not the prey species you believed us to be. We are the apex predators of this galaxy, and we will protect our own by any means necessary." The Council voted unanimously to grant humanity a permanent seat at the galactic table. The age of human expansion had officially begun, and the balance of power among the stars would never be the same. Captain Alex Rivera now commanded an entire squadron of ships that had been disguised as merchant vessels for over a decade. His crews had spent years living under cover while gathering intelligence and positioning assets throughout alien space. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we are receiving new colonization requests from the Centauri Syndicate. They want human protection for their outer territories." Rivera smiled as he read the formal request. "Approved. Deploy Squadron 7 to their border regions and establish permanent patrols." The transformation was remarkable. Species that had once dismissed humans as primitive were now begging for their protection. The galaxy had learned that humanity was not what it seemed, and that lesson was spreading quickly. In the depths of space, automated listening posts continued their eternal vigil. They waited and watched for any sign that humanity's children might need protection again. The Ghost Fleet had returned to its hidden bases, but it would never sleep as deeply as it had before. Deep beneath Earth's surface, Fleet Admiral Kane stood in the command center that controlled humanity's secret military assets. Banks of computers monitored every human settlement in the galaxy and tracked the movements of potentially hostile species. "Admiral," his aide reported, "intelligence indicates that the Corvan Empire is considering an expansion into human space." Kane studied the reports with interest. Deploy reconnaissance assets to their border regions. Let them know we are watching. The galaxy had learned that humans were dangerous, but they were still discovering just how far humanity's reach extended. The network of hidden bases and disguised ships that had been built over decades was still revealing new surprises. Dr. Lisa Park continued her work treating both human and alien patients at the medical facility on Kepler 442b, the former Vex. Prisoners had been released months earlier, but many had chosen to remain and work alongside their former enemies. Doctor, one of her Vex assistants, asked, "Why did humans choose mercy when they could have chosen revenge?" Park smiled as she continued her work. "Because mercy is strength and revenge is weakness. The galaxy understands that now." The simple SOS signal had summoned more than just a Warfleet. It had summoned a new era of galactic politics with humanity at its center. The species that had once hidden among the stars was now the dominant force shaping the future of interstellar civilization. Ambassador Chion's final words to the Galactic Council had become humanity's unofficial motto. They were not prey, and they would never be prey again. The galaxy belonged to those strong enough to claim it, and humanity had proven they were stronger than anyone had imagined. Ambassador Marcus Reed stepped off the transport shuttle and onto the neutral space station orbiting the massive gas giant Kepler 442b. The station was a marvel of alien engineering, built by a dozen different species working together to create a place where diplomacy could happen without favor to any one race. Reed had been preparing for this moment for 3 months. Ever since humanity made first contact with the galactic community, the Vorthic Empire had requested these trade negotiations, claiming they wanted to establish peaceful relations with the newcomers from Earth. Reed walked through the corridors with Captain Elena Vasquez beside him, along with 3 junior diplomats carrying briefcases full of trade proposals and cultural exchange documents. The station hummed with activity as various alien species went about their business, some tall and elegant, others short and stocky, all seemingly ignoring the small human delegation. Reed had studied everything available about the Vorthic Empire during the journey here. They controlled 17 star systems and had a reputation for being tough negotiators but fair traders. What the intelligence reports did not mention was their habit of testing new species through increasingly aggressive behavior. The Vorthak believed that strength was the only language worth speaking in the galaxy. High Counselor Thelmox waited in the main conference chamber, a room with transparent walls that offered a stunning view of the swirling gas giant below. The Vorthak leader was tall and imposing, with dark blue skin and 4 arms that moved with practiced grace. Trade Minister Krovden stood beside him, a shorter Vorthak with intricate silver markings covering his face. The negotiations began smoothly. Enough. Reed presented humanity's proposals for technology exchange, mineral rights, and safe passage agreements through Vorthak space. The humans were willing to share some of their agricultural techniques and medical knowledge in exchange for access to Vorthic manufacturing processes and star charts of the local sector. Thelmox listened with what appeared to be polite interest, occasionally asking questions about human industrial capacity and military strength. Reed answered honestly, explaining that humanity had 12 ships capable of interstellar travel and controlled only their home system. The Vorthic exchanged glances that Reed interpreted as satisfaction. What Reed did not know was that the Vorthek had already made their decision about humanity before the meeting began. In their experience, new species fell into 2 categories: those strong enough to be respected as equals, and those weak enough to be conquered and enslaved. The small number of human ships and their eagerness to negotiate suggested they belonged firmly in the second category. As the hours passed, the tone of the discussion began to change. Krovden started making demands instead of proposals, insisting that humanity provide detailed information about their defense capabilities and the locations of all their colonies. When Reed politely declined to share sensitive military information, Thelmox's expression hardened. The Vorthak leader stood and walked to the transparent wall, gazing out at the gas giant as if deep in thought. When he turned back to face the human delegation, his eyes held a cold calculation that made Reed's instincts scream danger. Thelmox spoke slowly and clearly, as if addressing children. He explained that the galaxy operated according to natural laws of strength and submission. Powerful species like the Vorthak ruled over weaker ones, providing protection in exchange for obedience and resources. This was the natural order, and humanity would need to accept their place within it. Reed felt his jaw tighten but kept his voice level and diplomatic. He explained that humanity preferred partnerships based on mutual benefit rather than domination. The human government was willing to negotiate fair agreements but would not accept subordination to any other species. The room fell silent for a long moment. Thelmox and Kravdan exchanged words in their own language, too rapid for the translation. Devices to follow. Then Thelmox smiled. But it was not a pleasant expression. He pressed a control on his wrist communicator and spoke a single word in Vorthak. Within seconds, the chamber doors burst open and armed Vorthak soldiers poured into the room. Reed started to protest, but the soldiers moved with practiced efficiency, separating the human delegation and forcing them against the far wall. Captain Vasquez reached for her sidearm but stopped when a dozen weapons pointed at her chest. The Vorthak soldiers wore full combat armor and carried energy weapons that could cut through steel. They clearly meant business. Thelmox walked over to the three junior diplomats, studying them like specimens in a laboratory. He selected the youngest, a woman named Jennifer, who had joined the diplomatic corps only 6 months earlier. Two soldiers grabbed her arms and forced her to her knees in the center of the room. Reed demanded to know what was happening, invoking diplomatic immunity and threatening consequences for any violence against the human delegation. Thelmox ignored him completely. Drawing an ornate energy pistol from his belt, the Vorthak leader began speaking in a formal tone, as if delivering a prepared speech. He explained that the galaxy had room for only one type of species, those willing to kneel before their betters. Humanity had shown promise but needed to learn their place in the natural order. This lesson would serve as an example for all humans to remember. The weapon discharged with a bright flash, and Jennifer collapsed to the floor. The other two junior diplomats tried to run, but the soldiers caught them easily. Thelmox executed them with the same cold efficiency, making sure Reed and Vasquez watched every moment. Throughout the entire execution, station security cameras recorded everything. Thelmox wanted the galaxy to see what happened to species who refused to submit to Vorthak authority. He believed the footage would terrify other races into compliance and demonstrate Vorthak power to potential rivals. When it was over, Thelmox holstered his weapon and turned back to Reed with the same pleasant smile he had worn at the beginning of the meeting. He explained that humanity now had a choice. They could submit to Vorthak rule and accept protection as a client species, or they could face the full military might of the Empire. Reed stared at the bodies of his colleagues, feeling a cold rage building in his chest. When he looked up at Thelmox, his expression was perfectly calm and controlled. He spoke in a quiet voice that somehow carried more menace than any shout could have managed. He told Thelmox that the Vorthak had made a grave miscalculation. They had assumed humanity was weak because they saw only what humans wanted them to see. That assumption would cost them everything they had built over the past 1,000 years. Thelmox laughed and dismissed the threat as the empty words of a defeated species. He allowed Reed and Vasquez to leave with their colleagues' bodies, confident that the lesson had been learned. The galaxy would soon hear about what happened here, and other species would remember to show proper respect to their Vorthak superiors. As the human ship departed the station, Captain Vasquez activated her private communication console and sent an encrypted message to Earth. The response came back within minutes, and when she read it, her face went pale. She turned to Ambassador Reed, who was staring out at the stars with an expression she had never seen before. She showed him the message on her screen and watched as he read the 3 simple words that would change the galaxy forever. Reed nodded slowly and told her to set course for home at maximum speed. There were preparations to make, and humanity had been getting ready for this moment much longer than anyone suspected. Protocol 7 was now active. and the Vorthic Empire had just made the biggest mistake in their species' history. Supreme War Master Kethver stood in the command center of his flagship, gazing at the holographic display showing 200 Vorthic warships arranged in perfect battle formation. The fleet was the largest military force the Empire had assembled. In 50 years, more than enough to reduce a primitive human colony to molten rock and ash. Around him, his officers celebrated their easy victory over the weak species that had dared to refuse. Vorthic authority, Emperor Zulfanur appeared on the communication screen from the Imperial Palace on Nexus Prime, his forearms gesturing dramatically, as he addressed the assembled fleet commanders. He spoke of the glorious destiny of the Vorthic Empire and the importance of teaching lesser species their proper place in the galactic order. The humans would serve as an example to other races who might consider resistance to Vorthic rule. The Emperor dismissed intelligence reports suggesting that humanity might possess more military capability than they had revealed during diplomatic contacts. Such concerns were the product of weak minds that failed to understand the natural superiority of the Vorthic race. Any species advanced enough to threaten the Empire would never have attempted peaceful negotiation in the first place. Kethver shared his Emperor's confidence as the fleet approached the human colony of New Geneva. The planet was a recent settlement with only 2 million inhabitants, defended by nothing more than a few orbital platforms and maybe some surface-based weapons. His ships carried enough firepower to crack the planet's crust if necessary, though such extreme measures would hardly be required against primitive human technology. Meanwhile, on New Geneva's surface, Commander Lisa Park coordinated the evacuation of the colony's 2.3 million civilians with calm efficiency that spoke of months of preparation. Transport ships that appeared to be standard civilian vessels lifted off from spaceports across the planet, carrying families and essential personnel to hidden shelters in the asteroid belt. The evacuation had begun the moment Protocol 7 activated, following plans that had been rehearsed dozens of times. Captain David Wright supervised the loading of the last transport, a massive ship that appeared to be an ordinary cargo hauler but was actually something far more dangerous. His crew worked with the practiced movements of trained military personnel, though their uniforms bore the logos of civilian shipping companies rather than military insignia. As the Vorthic fleet entered the outer system, Commander Park retreated to her command bunker deep beneath the colony's main city. The facility was hidden beneath what appeared to be ordinary municipal buildings, connected by tunnels that had been excavated under the cover of infrastructure development projects. Her command staff consisted of officers who had been preparing for this moment since the colony's founding. The Vorthic ships assumed standard orbital bombardment positions with the arrogant confidence of predators approaching helpless prey. Kethver ordered a preliminary scan of the planet's defenses and was pleased to discover exactly what he had expected: a few outdated missile batteries and some energy shields that might protect individual buildings but would be useless against concentrated fleet bombardment. What the Vorthic sensors did not detect were the massive installations hidden beneath the colony's surface. The entire planet had been constructed as a fortress disguised as a peaceful settlement, with weapon systems concealed so effectively that they remained invisible until the moment of activation. Every building, every road, every seemingly innocent structure had been designed to serve a dual purpose. Kethver opened communication channels to the planet and delivered the ultimatum that had worked successfully against dozens of other species throughout Vorthic history. The humans had 1 hour to surrender unconditionally and submit to Imperial authority, or their colony would be destroyed as an example to the rest of their species. Resistance was futile against the overwhelming power of the Vorthic military. Commander Park's response was broadcast on open frequencies, so that every ship in the attacking fleet could hear her words clearly. She thanked the Vorthic commander for providing such an excellent target for weapons testing and suggested that he might want to reconsider his tactical position while he still had time to retreat. The Vorthic officers laughed at what they interpreted as desperate bravado from a doomed enemy commander. Kethver ordered the bombardment to begin, targeting the colony's power plants and communication centers. first to maximize the psychological impact on any surviving defenders. His ships opened fire with the coordinated precision of a military force that had never known defeat. The planet's surface erupted in brilliant explosions as Vorthek energy weapons struck their targets, vaporizing buildings and creating massive craters that could be seen from orbit. For several minutes, it appeared that the attack was proceeding exactly as planned, with human defenses offering no meaningful resistance to the overwhelming firepower directed against them. Then the ground began to move in ways that violated everything the Vorthek knew about planetary geology. Entire sections of the colony's surface split open like massive doors, revealing weapon installations that dwarfed anything in the Imperial arsenal. Railgun batteries emerged from hidden silos, their barrels longer than most. Vorthek destroyers and crackling with electromagnetic energy that made the air itself shimmer. "Commander," Park's voice echoed across the battlefield as she activated systems that had been 50 years in the making. The hidden fortress revealed itself in all its terrible glory, transforming from an apparently defenseless colony into the most heavily armed planetary defense network in known space. Every building that had been destroyed in the initial bombardment had been a decoy, designed to absorb enemy fire while the real weapons remained safely hidden. The railguns opened fire with a sound like thunder rolling across the heavens, launching projectiles at significant fractions of light speed that tore through Vorthek shields as if they were made of paper. Ships that had ruled the spaceways for centuries simply ceased to exist as the kinetic energy weapons reduced them to expanding clouds of superheated plasma. Kethver watched in horror as half his fleet disappeared in the first salvo, their destruction so rapid that many of the ships never had time to send distress signals. The remaining vessels attempted to scatter and find cover behind the planet's moons, but the human weapons tracked them with targeting systems that seemed to anticipate their movements with impossible accuracy. Captain Wright's transport ship suddenly dropped its disguise and revealed itself as something that belonged in the nightmares of enemy commanders. The vessel bristled with weapons that had been hidden behind retractable hull plating, and its engines produced energy signatures that matched those of a heavy battlecruiser. Within seconds, it was cutting through Vorthek formations with firepower that exceeded anything its size should have been able to mount. The battle became a systematic demonstration of superior technology and tactics, as human forces that had remained hidden throughout the galaxy's history finally revealed themselves. Fighters launched from concealed hangars performed maneuvers that should have been impossible, using thrust vectoring systems that allowed them to change direction without regard for conventional physics. Kethver attempted to call for reinforcements, but discovered that his communications were being jammed by systems that infiltrated his ship's networks and turned his own equipment against him. Every tactical decision he made was anticipated and countered by defenders who seemed to know his intentions before he did. As his fleet disintegrated around him, the Vorthek commander finally understood the magnitude of his empire's mistake. The humans had not been hiding their weakness during the diplomatic negotiations. They had been concealing their strength while gathering intelligence about Vorthek military capabilities and battle tactics. The final blow came when Kethver's flagship suffered catastrophic damage to its main engines and began falling toward the planet's surface. As he activated the emergency escape pods, his last transmission was a desperate warning to the Imperial capital. Humanity was not the primitive species they appeared to be, and the Empire faced an enemy that had been preparing for this war longer than anyone suspected. His message was intercepted by human signals intelligence before it could reach Vorthek space, but it would not have mattered if it had been received. At that very moment, massive human fleets were emerging from hyperspace around Nexus Prime, and the Vorthek Empire was about to discover that their attack on New Geneva had been nothing more than the opening move in a campaign that would reshape the balance of power throughout the galaxy. The emergency session began at 0300 hours in the deepest levels of Luna Base, hidden beneath miles of rock and metal on Earth's moon. Admiral Victoria Cross sat at the head of the conference table, her weathered face illuminated by holographic displays showing the locations of every human ship in known space. General Robert Kane stood beside a massive tactical display, while Dr. James Mitchell pulled up classified files that very few people had ever seen. President Alexander Torres appeared on the main screen from his secure bunker on Earth, his expression grim as he reviewed the footage from the space station. The execution of 3 human diplomats had been broadcast across the galaxy within hours, exactly as the Vorthak intended. What they did not realize was that they had just triggered a response 50 years in the making. Dr. Mitchell began his briefing with information that would have shocked every alien species in the galaxy. Humanity's first contact with extraterrestrial technology had not happened 3 months ago, during the formal diplomatic meeting. It had occurred 53 years earlier when a damaged alien scout ship crashed in the Australian desert, carrying technology that changed everything humanity thought they knew about the universe. The crash site had been secured within hours by a joint military task force that included scientists, engineers, and intelligence specialists from every major Earth nation. The alien crew was dead, but their ship contained faster-than-light drives, energy weapons, and communication systems that were centuries ahead of human technology. Instead of announcing the discovery to the world, the global leadership made a decision that seemed paranoid at the time but now appeared brilliantly prescient. They would reverse engineer everything, build a hidden fleet, and prepare for the day when humanity would need to defend itself against hostile alien forces. The public would know nothing until the preparations were complete. Every space program, every technological advancement, every military development for the next 5 decades was secretly guided by knowledge gained from that single crashed ship. Admiral Cross activated a series of holographic displays that showed the true scope of human space operations. While the galaxy believed humanity controlled only Earth and had 12 primitive ships, the reality was staggering. Hidden shipyards throughout the solar system had been working around the clock for decades, using asteroid mining operations as cover for the largest military construction project in human history. The Admiral's voice was steady as she revealed numbers that dwarfed the military forces of most galactic powers. 847 battleships, each one larger and more heavily armed than anything the Vorthak possessed. 2,300 cruisers equipped with weapons that combined human engineering with alien technology. 15,000 fighters that could outmaneuver and outgun anything else in known space. General Kane explained how the deception had been maintained for so long. Every ship the aliens had observed was real, but they were disguised reconnaissance vessels gathering intelligence on galactic military capabilities, trade routes, and political structures. The crews had standing orders to appear primitive and non-threatening, while secretly mapping every aspect of alien civilization. The merchant vessels that had visited alien ports were actually heavily armed warships with their weapons hidden behind false bulkheads. The exploration ships that had been cataloging distant star systems were scout vessels identifying strategic targets and potential staging areas. Even the diplomatic mission that had just ended in tragedy was part of the intelligence gathering operation. Dr. Mitchell pulled up tactical analyses of every major alien military force in the known galaxy. Human agents had been observing and recording for months, identifying weaknesses, studying battle tactics, and developing countermeasures. The Vorthak Empire, despite their reputation for military prowess, used predictable formation strategies and relied on weapons technology that human shields could easily deflect. President Torres authorized the activation of Protocol 7 with a simple voice command that was simultaneously transmitted to every hidden base and disguised ship in human space. Within minutes, manufacturing facilities that the galaxy believed were civilian industries began producing military equipment at maximum capacity. Transport ships that appeared to be carrying agricultural supplies revealed themselves to be troop carriers loaded with Marines in powered armor. The transformation was stunning to observe. Asteroid mining platforms unfolded to reveal massive gun batteries and missile launchers. Space stations that provided services to alien traders opened hidden docking bays containing entire fighter squadrons. Even the orbital elevators connecting Earth to its space installations were revealed to be disguised MSS drivers capable of launching kinetic projectiles across the solar system, Admiral Cross began issuing deployment orders to fleet commanders who had been waiting for this moment their entire careers. The first battle group, consisting of 200 battleships and supporting vessels, would move immediately toward Vorthic space to prevent any retaliation against human colonies. The second and third groups would secure strategic positions along major trade routes, cutting off potential Vorthak reinforcements and supply lines. General Kane coordinated the deployment of specialized units that had been training for decades in zero-gravity combat and alien environment operations. These were not ordinary soldiers but enhanced warriors equipped with armor that made them nearly invulnerable to conventional weapons and capable of operating in any environment from frozen asteroids to toxic gas giants. The intelligence network that had been secretly operating throughout alien space activated simultaneously, providing real-time information about Vorthic fleet movements and military preparations. Human agents who had been posing as merchants, researchers, and diplomats began transmitting detailed tactical data about enemy positions, supply depots, and command structures. Dr. Mitchell revealed the final component of humanity's hidden preparations: technological advantages that went far beyond what they had learned from the original crashed ship. Human scientists had not simply copied alien technology but had improved upon it, creating weapons and defenses that surpassed anything currently deployed by galactic civilizations. The energy shields protecting human ships could absorb and redirect incoming fire with an efficiency that would render most alien weapons useless. The quantum tunneling drives allowed human vessels to appear anywhere in a star system without the normal exit signatures that enemies could detect and target. Most importantly, the adaptive artificial intelligence systems controlling human fleets could coordinate thousands of ships with a precision that no biological crew could match. President Torres addressed the assembled commanders with words that would be remembered throughout human history. He explained that the Vorthak had made the mistake of believing that mercy was weakness and that diplomacy indicated helplessness. They had chosen to interpret humanity's peaceful approach as submission rather than recognizing it as the restraint of a species that preferred cooperation to conquest. The president's final order was simple and absolute: show the galaxy what happened when someone murdered human diplomats under a flag of truce. The Vorthic Empire had existed for 1,000 years, but their civilization would not survive to see another century. This would serve as a message to every other species that might consider testing human resolve. As the massive human fleet began moving out from hidden bases throughout the solar system, long-range sensors detected Vorthic ships heading toward the human colony of New Geneva. The aliens were apparently planning to follow up their diplomatic massacre with an attack on civilian targets, believing they could terrorize humanity into submission before any meaningful resistance could be organized. They were about to discover that humanity had been ready for this war since before the current generation of Vorthic leaders was born, and that their attack on New Geneva would be walking into the most carefully prepared trap in galactic history. The space around Nexus Prime had been peaceful for over 300 years, protected by the most powerful fleet in Vorthak history and defended by orbital platforms that could reduce entire invasion forces to cosmic dust. Defense Coordinator Molther monitored his sensor displays with the calm confidence of someone who had never seen his home system threatened by any force capable of meaningful resistance. That confidence shattered when 800 human warships materialized from hyperspace in a perfect sphere around the planet, their emergence so precisely coordinated that they appeared to have been placed there by some cosmic hand. The formation was mathematically perfect, with overlapping fields of fire that covered every possible escape route and defensive position in the system. Admiral Victoria Cross stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching as her fleet completed the most complex tactical maneuver in human military history. Every ship had jumped from different starting points throughout human space, traveling various distances through hyperspace, and arrived at exactly the same moment in positions calculated to maximize their tactical advantage. The operation required timing precise to the microsecond and navigation accurate to within meters. the Vorthek. Defenders stared at their sensors in disbelief, unable to accept the evidence of their own instruments. The humans were supposed to have 12 ships total, primitive vessels barely capable of interstellar travel. Instead, they faced a fleet that outnumbered their entire military and displayed technology that seemed to violate several fundamental laws of physics. Molther activated every defensive system in the Nexus Prime system, calling his ships to battle stations and powering up orbital weapons platforms that had protected the Vorthek capital for centuries. His commanders reported ready status from 230 warships, the largest concentration of Imperial military power ever assembled in one location. Admiral, cross open communication channels to every ship and installation in the system, her voice carrying clearly across the electromagnetic spectrum as she delivered humanity's response to the diplomatic massacre. She spoke slowly and clearly, ensuring that the translation systems would render her words perfectly in the Vorthek language. She explained that the Vorthek Empire had requested a lesson in galactic hierarchy, and that humanity was prepared to provide comprehensive education on the subject. Class was now in session, and the curriculum would cover the consequences of murdering diplomats under a flag of truce. She suggested that any Vorthek personnel who wished to survive the demonstration should abandon their posts immediately. The human fleet began its attack with weapons that redefined the possibilities of space warfare. Energy beams that could cut through planetary crust struck Vorthek shields and passed through them as if they did not exist. Kinetic projectiles launched from railguns created impact craters visible from hundreds of thousands of kilometers away. Most terrifying of all were the quantum torpedoes that seemed to phase in and out of normal space, bypassing defensive systems entirely, Captain Rachel Foster commanded. A squadron of stealth ships that had infiltrated the system hours before the main fleet arrived. Her vessels were invisible to Vorthek sensors, using technology that bent electromagnetic radiation around their hulls and rendered them effectively transparent. They had been systematically destroying communication arrays, sensor networks, and command centers while the defenders focused on the obvious threat posed by the main battle fleet. The Vorthek defense collapsed with a speed that shocked observers. Throughout the galaxy, ships that had been the pride of the Imperial Navy simply ceased to exist as human weapons, demonstrated capabilities that exceeded theoretical maximums for energy output and projectile velocity. The orbital platforms that had protected Nexus Prime for centuries lasted less than 10 minutes against coordinated bombardment from vessels that seemed to ignore the normal limitations of space-based warfare. Molther watched as carefully constructed defensive network crumble like ancient ruins exposed to a hurricane. Every tactical manual, every strategic doctrine, every assumption about space combat that had guided Vorthek military thinking for a millennium was revealed to be obsolete in the face of human technology and coordination. The most devastating aspect of the human attack was not its overwhelming firepower but its surgical precision. Every shot was calculated to disable rather than destroy when possible, targeting weapon systems and engines while leaving life support intact. The humans were not conducting a massacre but a systematic dismantling of Vorthek military capability. And they were doing it with an efficiency that spoke of months of detailed planning. As the battle raged in space, human marines in powered armor began boarding disabled Vorthok vessels with tactics that seemed impossible to counter. Their armor absorbed energy weapon fire without apparent damage, and they moved through ship corridors with the fluid grace of dancers performing a rehearsed routine. Every boarding action was completed within minutes, with Vorthek crews surrendering, rather than facing the unstoppable advance of heavily armed soldiers. The Galactic Council's emergency monitoring station in the Kepler sector recorded every moment of the battle, transmitting real-time footage to government centers throughout known space. Species that had dismissed humanity as primitive newcomers watched in stunned silence as the newcomers systematically destroyed the military forces of a major galactic power with casualty ratios that approached the mathematically impossible. Emperor Zulfanor emerged from his palace bunker to find his capital city surrounded by human dropships that had somehow penetrated planetary defenses without triggering a single alarm. The soldiers who secured the Imperial complex moved with the mechanical precision of a perfectly coordinated military unit, each one knowing exactly where to go and what to do without apparent communication between team members. Defense Coordinator Molther made one final desperate attempt to rally his remaining forces for a counterattack against the human fleet. He activated the planet's surface-to-space missile batteries and ordered every surviving ship to concentrate their fire on Admiral Cross's flagship, hoping that eliminating the enemy commander might disrupt their coordination. The missiles never reached their targets, intercepted by point defense systems that tracked and destroyed incoming projectiles with accuracy percentages that approached theoretical perfection. The concentrated fire from Vorthok ships simply disappeared into the energy shields protecting the human flagship, absorbed and redirected harmlessly into space by defensive systems that seemed to violate conservation of energy. Admiral Cross responded to the attack by ordering a demonstration that would be remembered throughout galactic history. A single human battleship targeted the largest moon-orbiting Nexus Prime and fired what appeared to be a standard kinetic projectile. When the round struck, it did not simply create a crater but actually shifted the moon's orbit by several kilometers, sending seismic shocks through the planet below. The message was clear to every observer. Humanity possessed weapons capable of moving astronomical objects, and they were showing remarkable restraint by limiting their attacks to military targets. The Vorthok Empire existed only because the humans chose to allow it to continue existing. As the last Vorthok defenders surrendered, long-range sensors detected massive fleets from 3 other major galactic powers converging on the Nexus Prime system. The Hegemony Council, the Stellar Federation, and the Trade Consortium were all dispatching their most powerful battle groups, apparently convinced that humanity represented a threat to the established galactic order. Admiral Cross reviewed the tactical displays showing the approaching fleets and smiled grimly as she realized that the galaxy's political leaders had learned nothing from observing the destruction of Vorthok military power. They still believed that the old rules applied and that superior numbers could overcome superior technology and training. She opened communication channels to her fleet commanders and began issuing orders for the next phase of humanity's introduction to galactic politics. The Vorthok had been a warm-up exercise, a demonstration of human capabilities against a single opponent. Now it was time to show the galaxy's major powers what happened when they tried to threaten Earth's children. Fleet Admiral Torgasha commanded the largest military force ever assembled by the Hegemony Council. 1,500 warships representing 7 different species united by their shared fear of human expansion. His fleet emerged from hyperspace, with weapons charged and shields raised, expecting to face the scattered remnants of humanity's forces after their costly victory over the Vorthok Empire. Instead, he found 800 human ships in perfect formation, their hulls unmarked by battle damage and their energy signatures indicating full combat readiness. Worse still, his sensors detected additional human vessels positioned throughout the system, including stealth ships that appeared and disappeared from his displays like ghosts haunting the darkness between stars. Admiral Cross received the Hegemony fleet's arrival with calm satisfaction, having anticipated this response since the moment her forces entered Vorthok space. The galaxy's major powers had grown comfortable with the existing balance of terror, and they would naturally attempt to crush any force that threatened to upset their carefully maintained status quo. Counselor Valandra of the Neutral Mediation Corps transmitted desperate pleas for peaceful resolution from her vessel positioned at the edge of the system. She had spent her entire career preventing conflicts between galactic powers, and she recognized that the confrontation developing around Nexus Prime could easily escalate into a war that would consume entire sectors. Fleet Admiral Turgesh opened communication channels and delivered an ultimatum that had worked successfully for the Hegemony Council throughout its 1,000-year history. The humans would withdraw their forces immediately and submit to Council authority for judgment regarding their unprovoked attack on a sovereign galactic power. Refusal would result in the complete destruction of human civilization. Admiral Cross responded with information that changed everything the galaxy thought it knew about the recent conflict. She transmitted complete recordings of the diplomatic massacre that had triggered the war, along with intelligence files documenting decades of Vorthic aggression against weaker species. The humans had not launched an unprovoked attack but had responded to war crimes committed against their diplomatic personnel. More importantly, she revealed that humanity had been in secret communication with 17 different species currently under Vorthic domination. The primitive human merchant vessels that had been trading throughout the galaxy for months had actually been delivering weapons, tactical training, and coordination equipment to oppressed populations across multiple star systems. The galaxy was not witnessing a human invasion, but the beginning of a coordinated liberation movement that had been years in the planning. While the major powers had focused on maintaining their dominance over established territories, humanity had been quietly organizing the largest rebellion in galactic history. As if summoned by Admiral Cross's words, new fleets began emerging from hyperspace throughout the Nexus Prime system. These were not human vessels, but ships belonging to species that had been conquered and enslaved by the Vorthic Empire decades or centuries earlier. They flew alongside human escorts, their weapons targeting Vorthic installations rather than the hegemony forces. Captain Miguel Santos commanded the diplomatic escort vessel that brought Ambassador Reed back to the battlefield where his colleagues had been murdered. The ambassador's return was symbolic rather than practical, representing humanity's commitment to justice for crimes committed against diplomatic personnel under flags of truce. The liberation fleets struck Vorthic strongholds throughout the system, with precision that spoke of detailed intelligence and careful planning. Species that had been considered extinct by galactic historians emerged from hidden bases and refugee camps, their survival made possible by human support and their military capabilities enhanced by weapons technology that surpassed anything the major powers possessed. Fleet Admiral Turgash found his tactical situation becoming increasingly complex as more ships arrived in the system. His force was still numerically superior to the human fleet, but the addition of liberation forces and the presence of Vorthic defectors created a confused battlefield, where traditional formation strategies became impossible to implement. The situation became even more complicated when several ships from his own fleet broke formation and moved toward neutral positions. These vessels represented species that had been incorporated into the hegemony through conquest rather than voluntary alliance, and their crews were apparently inspired by the successful rebellion against Vorthic rule. Counselor Valandra seized the opportunity to propose a diplomatic solution that might prevent the conflict from escalating into full-scale galactic war. She suggested immediate negotiations between all parties, with humanity's actions subject to review by an expanded council that included representatives from previously unrecognized species. Admiral Cross agreed to negotiations but insisted that any new galactic order must be based on equality rather than conquest. The old system where stronger species dominated weaker ones had created the conditions that led to war crimes like the diplomatic massacre. Lasting peace required fundamental changes to the political structure that governed interstellar relations. Ambassador Reed took his place at the negotiating table with quiet dignity, representing a species that had transformed from apparent newcomers to the dominant military force in known space within a matter of weeks. His proposals were simple but revolutionary: complete autonomy for all species, regulated expansion based on mutual agreement rather than military conquest, and an end to the hierarchy system that placed some races above others. The negotiations revealed the true scope of humanity's preparations for galactic integration. They had not simply built a military force but had developed comprehensive plans for post-war reconstruction, economic development, and political reform. Every aspect of galactic civilization had been studied and analyzed with detailed proposals for improvement based on human observations of alien societies. The Vorthic Empire, facing internal revolution and military collapse, formally surrendered and requested protection under human authority. Their decision triggered a cascade of similar requests from other species, who recognized that the old galactic order was crumbling and wanted to align themselves with the emerging power structure, fleet. Admiral Turgash faced a choice that would define his place in history. He could order his fleet to attack the human forces and risk triggering a war that would devastate multiple sectors. Or he could accept the new reality and work toward a peaceful transition to whatever came next. His decision was influenced by reports from his intelligence officers indicating that human agents had been operating throughout hegemony space for months, gathering information about military capabilities and political structures. The humans had not simply prepared for war against the Vorthic, but had developed contingency plans for conflicts with every major galactic power. The final agreement established a new form of galactic government based on voluntary cooperation, rather than enforced submission. Species would maintain complete internal autonomy while participating in collective decision-making processes for issues that affected multiple star systems. Military forces would be regulated to prevent aggressive expansion, and conflicts would be resolved through mediation rather than conquest. Admiral Cross accepted her new role as head of the Galactic Defense Force, a multinational organization tasked with preventing any single species from achieving the kind of dominance that had enabled the Vorthic Empire's crimes. Her fleet would patrol the spaceways alongside vessels from dozens of species, all flying under a banner that represented cooperation rather than conquest. The transformation was symbolized by the sight of human ships patrolling alongside former enemies, their crews working together to maintain peace in regions that had known only war for centuries. The age of galactic empires was ending, replaced by an alliance of equals that offered hope for lasting stability. Ambassador Reed's final report to Earth contained a single paragraph that captured the magnitude of what humanity had accomplished. The species that had sought only peaceful coexistence had been forced to reveal their true strength, and in doing so had created the conditions for a new type of civilization, based on justice rather than power. As the new galactic order established itself, deep space monitoring stations detected unusual signals from beyond the galactic rim. Something vast and ancient was responding to the recent upheavals, stirring after eons of dormancy. Humanity's greatest test might still lie ahead, but they would face it as part of an alliance that included every free species in known space.